Unfortunately, we produce electronic waste, the so-called e-waste, at an unprecedented pace. So based on official data from the United Nations until 2016, we generated something like 45 million metric tons of e-waste. And only 20% of this tonnage found its way through proper recycling channels. Although e-waste may represent only 2% of solid waste streams, yet it can represent up to 70% of the hazardous waste that ends up in dump sites and landfills worldwide. And why inappropriate disposal is a huge issue? Actually, it's a huge issue because from various viewpoints, since e-waste contains various toxic substances dangerous for both humans and the environment. For example, typical poisonous substances found in e-waste include substances like cadmium, lead oxide, mercury, chromium, and brominated flame retardants. And also, apart from the environmental and health-related concerns, e-waste presents also a significant economic loss and tremendous loss of scarce and valuable raw materials. So what actually could be the answer to the aforementioned problem? I mean, managing e-waste. Reverse logistics activities could play an essential role in managing e-waste and further prolong the life cycle of electronic equipment. In the literature, you might find various definitions regarding reverse logistics. I have used the definition from the American Reverse Logistics Executive Council, which defines reverse logistics as the process of planning, implementing, and controlling the efficient, cost-effective flow of raw materials, in-process inventory, finished goods, and related information from the point of consumption to the point of origin for the purpose of recapturing value or proper disposal. And if I was to provide you with a more practical definition, I would say that reverse logistics may include the end-of-life collection of products and their repairing, disassembling, remanufacturing, recycling, and disposing of them to actually recapture value or ensure proper disposal. Therefore, reverse logistics provides the means for minimizing the waste generated in supply chain networks by actually recovering the remaining amount of used materials and resources, and at the same time producing new value-added products in an environmentally sustainable manner. With respect to the medical equipment, there exist two main pathways, as you may see in this figure, for decommissioning of a medical device and determining its final disposition after decontamination. Actually, this figure is from a report recently published by the World Health Organization. So, as you may see in this figure, the first option is the so-called permanent elimination, which entails, for example, either recycling, cannibalizing, or incinerating the device. And the second option is clearly reuse, which also entails either donate, sell, refurbish, reprocess, trade in, or internally reassign the device to another location. So despite the various benefits, as mentioned earlier, from reverse logistics activities of medical equipment, from an environmental and, of course, economic standpoint, currently there exist various barriers hindering the establishment of sound reverse logistics mechanisms. For example, not every medical device is appropriate for refurbishment, but it must fulfill certain requirements if it is intended for refurbishment. And these requirements may prove critical, for example, since they might have a directly impact on patients' health and also on the overall medical equipment's performance and safety specifications. Besides, the refurbishment of medical equipment entails processes that require a dedicated organizational framework, particularly one that relies mostly, I would say, on quality management systems. Also, from a regulatory perspective, the entity performing the refurbishment processes must be easily identifiable by the responsible organization, operator, inspector, or any kind of regulatory authority. And in general, I would say that regulatory oversight in the case of refurbished medical equipment is of paramount importance, because regulatory authorities should somehow verify that the refurbished device must meet the same regulatory requirements as applied to the original medical device. Even further, similar regulatory obstacles apply to actually positioning a piece of refurbished medical equipment into the market. And what I mean by saying additional market obstacles. For example, the refurbished device seller must abide by legal and regulatory requirements, like assuming, for example, responsibility for contractual or liability claims due to product failures, data privacy breaches during the refurbishing process, etc. And although certain markets, like, for example, the European Union single market, are governed by, I would say, overarching regulatory frameworks, significant differences across the 28 EU member states do currently exist. So such differences further, I would say, that further hinder the positioning of the refurbished medical equipment into the market and the further establishment of the appropriate or the necessary distribution and sales channels. Therefore, it's evident so far that when establishing refurbishing channels for medical equipment, one should take into account the various regulatory, operational, and security requirements. And in particular, such requirements, if we were categorize them, they would include, first, the establishment of a reverse logistics system where all the refurbishing activities should be fully traceable, both upstream and downstream the reverse logistics supply chain. Secondly, the system should provide strong integrity and privacy guarantees and forensics by design features, particularly for auditability purposes and regulatory compliance related to the undertaken refurbishing activities. And third, multiple entities should have access to and share information related to the various refurbishing activities taking place. So, bringing all these things together, I mean, the current challenges the reverse logistics of medical equipment are faced with, coupled with the aforementioned requirements, we have developed a blockchain-enabled architecture, bringing together all these things, both the requirements and also at the same time trying to solve the limitations mentioned earlier. So in this figure, you may see the proposed blockchain-enabled architecture. So for achieving the desired granularity in tracing the medical equipment reverse logistics activities, we define the medical devices deemed eligible for refurbishment and consider at the same time the relevant refurbishing activities and the various stakeholders involved. We also rely, for developing our architecture, we also have relied on the best refurbishment practices adopted by global industry players and leading health organizations, like, for example, the World Health Organization. And finally, we have derived many ISO-related requirements for refurbishing medical equipment, as described in the relevant literature or in many ISO-related reports. We have also used a 5-step refurbishing process, which is recommended by the global medical imaging industry, which is a conglomerate of the well-known, the most, let's say, the biggest corporations regarding the production of medical equipment. And we did that in order to map the different refurbishing activities captured by our approach. And since not all the medical devices are eligible for refurbishment, we must apply certain eligibility criteria. And that's why we have used the 5-step refurbishing process, which considers the following phases, as you can see at the bottom of this figure. The selection of the medical equipment, disassembly, packaging and shipping, the refurbishing, the reinstallment, and the various professional services. Now, regarding the stakeholders involved in these reverse logistic channels, we have considered a multi-tier approach where global players belonging to Tier 1 have several large Tier 2 companies, complemented by a few medium and small-sized companies, which we use the term Tier 3 to somehow categorize them. In particular, we consider original equipment manufacturers, we consider refurbishers, service providers, distributors, remarketers, state authorities, and of course the end customers, which in our case might be a hospital or any other kind of hospital institution. And based on the information provided regarding, the refurbishing processes and the stakeholders involved, we have developed 3 functional smart contracts. We have developed the so-called the traceability smart contract, the stakeholders smart contract, and the processes smart contract. And obviously, as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, this is a distributed architecture based on blockchain. Okay. In our architecture, as you can see in this figure, the upper part reflects what we call the digitization of all the refurbishing activities, obviously using blockchain and smart contracts, whereas the lower part depicts the physical operations taking place during the refurbishing processes, as mentioned, based on benchmarks and good refurbishing practices from the industry. And of course, all the stakeholders, we consider that they participate in a private blockchain network and they have access to the network through an API. Now, regarding the implementation, you can find all the code we developed and ran in GitHub. We created a local Ethereum blockchain using Node and Ganas CLI and Truffle to compile and deploy the smart contracts. We have assumed that the involved actors are registered in the blockchain, and of course they have a valid address with their respective pair of public and private keys. And as I said, we developed 3 smart contracts, one for the stakeholders, one for the reverse logistics processes, and one for the medical equipment, the products in our case, which all 3 interact with each other. The smart contracts, from a technical standpoint, implement various access control restrictions, for example, using the required clause in Solidity. and also permissionless functions to retrieve statistics and hashes pointing to extended information of each stakeholder, reverse logistics process, or medical equipment. And the overall tests performed in our local blockchain showed that the average transaction time is in the magnitude of milliseconds. For example, this is the time required to contract deployment and the constructor's deployment. And that gives us the opportunity to somehow use the proposed architecture as a kind of real-time reverse logistics traceability mechanism. Important technical detail. An important technical detail has to do with the off-chain data storage. Since blockchain technology is not suitable for storing a large amount of data, we have applied off-chain storage approaches using, for example, IPFS to enable scalability and integrity for storing and retrieving the records of the overall reverse logistics activities. Some concluding remarks. The proposed framework, as I said, offers several benefits in terms of improved reverse logistics process management, security and resilience, and the decentralized and secure nature of blockchain safeguards the accuracy, trustworthiness, timeliness, and the usability of the exchange reverse logistics info among the various reverse logistics stakeholders. For future work, we would like to focus more on the implementation of the proposed framework in a real-life application scenario, and also we would like to see to use actually blockchain tokens for completely digitizing the overall medical equipment reverse logistics activities. Thank you for your attention. Any questions?